So I would now like to invite Phoebe to join us. Phoebe has mentored Libin, and Libin will be discussing... Libin will be discussing domestic abuse. Phoebe will share more about his topic before he reaches you on the stage.
Okay, perfect. So Libin is an incredible young person, and I think the main thing I've taken away from Libin is his passion for his topic. Libin's impact that his speech will have on you is hopefully the biggest thing to take away. It's that everything that I've done with my young people is made me think that his speech really had an impact for me. How I'll think about things in St. John, things I see on duty, things I think I'll see day to day. I'm meant to do day to day, but also day to day in my life. Very attractive, Libin really made me think.
Imagine being trapped in a repetitive cycle. Then imagine that cycle being the cycle of abuse. How would you feel? Let me try my best to demonstrate this for you. Take this box and imagine it to be your home, the place where you feel most comfortable, your safe space. And this is the key to your home, your way to leave. At first, it may seem so easy to just take the key and walk out, but it's so much harder when the key is out of your reach. Essentially, domestic abuse is any form of threatening behaviour, violence or abuse, including psychological, physical, mental or emotional forms of abuse between adults or in younger relations, regardless of gender or sexuality. Abuse often starts with tension building. This is when abusive partners lash out in response to external stress factors, so trouble at work or family issues. During this stage, victims tend to feel anxious and feel the need to placate the abuser. Then the abuser eventually tries to release this tension by trying to establish power through various forms of abuse. After the incident of abuse, the abuser tries apologizing or even denies any form of abuse. Sometimes they even try to blame the victim to avoid responsibility. This is known as the stage of reconciliation. Then the abuser moves on to the honeymoon or calm phase, where the incident is forgotten, no abuse happens, and the abuser often uses kindness and gifts to move past the abuse. In other words, this is known as the cycle of abuse. In abusive relationships, this cycle repeats over time, over and over and over. How would you feel knowing that this is all likely to happen again and again and again? Let me tell you the story of James Harrison, a 25-year-old writer from New York who thought he met the love of his life, who then became his wife, and then his abuser, Amy. Not even a month after they had met, the couple became an official Facebook couple. 6 months later, Amy was sacked from her job and then evicted from her apartment. James decided to help her out by inviting her to stay at his apartment for as long as she wanted. Little did he know he was inviting abuse into his home for the next 6 months, both physically as well as mentally. It all started with verbal assaults, which he thought were harmless since he wasn't being physically attacked, so that wasn't abuse, right? Just words, nothing more. James was wrong. Slowly, verbal assaults turned to fists, and just a month ago, James was rushed to A&E. When asked why he didn't speak up sooner, James said it was because he was ashamed. "I couldn't even tell my roommate," he said. "I was so ashamed of myself and having to ask for help." James's story is just one of many, some out in the public eye, some not talked about by the victims themselves. Every victim will have a unique story, and every victim deserves justice. James's story also demonstrates to us that it's not just women that experience domestic abuse, it's those who identify as male too. Domestic abuse applies to all in society. Statistics show that domestic violence cases are increasing every year. In 2018, 700,000 cases of domestic abuse were reported, and it's scary to think that only 100,000 of those cases went to trial, and even harder to accept that only 25,000 abusers gained a conviction. This demonstrates why so many victims decide to put off reporting domestic abuse, as unfortunately the likelihood of them receiving justice is unfortunately very low, and this is something we must advocate to change. Did you know that shockingly, each year, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men will experience domestic abuse? How does this make you feel? So let's apply this to a St. John Ambulance duty. If you see something on duty that makes you suspect that somebody is experiencing domestic abuse, you should approach them and ask them if they need any support, and point them in the right direction to support services, so for example, the National Domestic Abuse Helpline or Mankind. If you think they are in immediate danger, you must call the police. We should look out for signs of abuse in our day-to-day roles to protect the amazing people in our St. John family and those that we care for. There are so many signs of domestic abuse that we should be on the lookout for. For example, some include loss of self-confidence or self-esteem, wearing long sleeves in extremely warm weather, although this could be for medical or religious reasons, or being jumpier and more on guard. People often ask, why don't victims just leave? Often the path to leaving isn't as clear as it may look. Victims often feel that the fear of leaving is greater than the fear of staying. The fear of the unknown can be a powerful reason for staying put. Also, victims are often threatened with physical harm if they try to leave, clearly demonstrated by the statistics. A strong support network is so incredibly important for victims when they are going through such a mentally draining time. An unsupportive friends and family may make it harder for victims to feel as if they can leave. Knowledge of the difficulties of single parenting and reduced financial circumstances may factor into their decision to put up with abuse. So the path to freedom isn't always as easy as it seems, and finding that key to escape is truly a challenging obstacle. So what can you do to help those suffering from domestic abuse? If you know somebody that is experiencing domestic abuse, it's so important than ever that you let them know that they are not on their own and that you will be there every step of the way to support, comfort and advocate for them as much as they would like, and be there if they choose to report it. Whether you're friend, family or even colleague, be there when you need to be the most. Domestic violence is a silent killer, so will you be the person that helps victims reach for that key to freedom?
Thank you, Libin, for that brilliant insight into domestic abuse, but also what we can do to support victims of domestic abuse.